Is your podcast producing content but not producing clients? I mean, that's what we all want, right? You probably have a constraint or what I call a bottleneck in your system. And most business owners will misdiagnose where that bottleneck is, which is why they just keep creating more content instead of optimizing what already exists. So today we're going to diagnose it. Hey friend, welcome to Podcast First Marketing. I am Allison, and I am here to help you turn your podcast into your most powerful marketing tool, one that will bring in email subscribers, sales, and most importantly, clients without you having to be everywhere. I was doing some thinking about this and I started to realize that all of these higher level business owners, they are not asking themselves, why is this not working? Like they don't just stop and say, why isn't this working? They're really asking themselves, where is it going wrong? Where is the constraint, the bottleneck? What's happening and how can we fix it? Every system, business, everything you have is going to have some form of constraint, and your podcast is no different. If your podcast is feeling like it is taking up so much time, but it's not profitable, it's not converting, you're getting visibility, but it's not bringing in the revenue, there is a constraint in your system, a bottleneck, a limitation. Something is holding it up. And once you can identify that, everything will change. But we don't always know where that bottleneck is. And some of us don't even know that it is a bottleneck or what to look for. And I'm seeing that most podcasters will misdiagnose their problem. Most will assume that the bottleneck is that they don't have enough downloads. That's the biggest one. How can I get more downloads? I hear that often. How can I grow my downloads? Or maybe I just don't have enough episodes yet. I need to keep, doing more. Maybe I should go to 2 episodes a week. They're not promoting it enough. That's why I hear that often. I just didn't promote my podcast enough. It didn't work because of that. They think they need to post on social media more. So they increase what they are doing. That is not the thing that's working. That's not helping. You need to understand that if you keep doing things, it's like, what's the definition of insanity? Doing the same thing over and over with the same result. Growth is not going to come from how many episodes you have. Yeah, the more episodes you have, the better you get. You do learn from the more episodes you have. You have to get started to find out what works and what needs to be tweaked. Where growth does come from is removing those bottlenecks, the constraints, the limitations that are holding you back. And a lot of people just don't know what those bottlenecks are. So today I'm going to talk about the 4 most common podcasting bottlenecks, because usually podcast marketing falls into one of these 4. Now, does this mean they are the only 4? No, not at all. But they're the 4 most common ones. So as I walk through these, I wanted you to notice which ones feel familiar to you. Can you nod your head and say, oh, I've done that, or yep, I've done this? Okay, so let's start with the first one. This is the traffic bottleneck. And I think this is like the most common one, because if people cannot find your show, they can't listen. So this is basically the visibility and SEO of your podcast. If aligned listeners aren't discovering you, what's going to happen? Maybe you're talking to yourself and helping yourself. That's great. But aligned listeners that you could see becoming your clients, are not discovering your show consistently enough. Now, I want to mention, this does not mean that you need to go viral on Instagram, or you need to keep posting reels, or even repurposing your podcast to Instagram. That is not going to solve this visibility problem. This is about discoverability, how they're finding you. Are your episode titles search aligned? Can someone put it in the search app or even somewhere else, even AI, and be found? Is your positioning clear enough so that the right person recognizes themselves immediately in what you're talking about? Can they say, oh my gosh, she's talking to me. This is what I do. Are you optimizing your show description or your keywords, even the category that your podcast is under? Those all are relevant in having someone discover you, especially organically. Are you strategically placing your podcast where your ideal listener already spends time? If your listener is not watching videos, don't waste your time on YouTube. Don't even waste your time on posting Instagram Reels. Figure out where your ideal listener also spends their time, besides listening to you, of course, and go there. But a lot of what I teach my clients is to really focus on SEO and getting their, I guess, ears from the people who they're wanting to find to know that you have a show. And that might be getting on other people's podcasts. If the right people can't find your show, the rest of your system or your podcast sales funnel, it doesn't matter, because what's the point if nobody's finding you? So we want to focus on that. Remember, it does not matter how strong your episodes are or even how good your offer is if nobody is listening. There's no leverage there. So here are some, what I'm going to call symptoms that I want you to think about. If this is you, you have a traffic bottleneck. So maybe your content is very strong. You are confident in your expertise, but your downloads are flat. Your growth feels slow. You just have this feeling no one is listening. You're not seeing your follower count go up in Apple or Spotify. You don't see your listen rates, because remember, downloads, for example, I turn my downloads off on my podcast app. I use Apple. So if I listen to your podcast, it's not going to show up as a download. So that's why we also want to look at listeners and things like that. So those are other metrics to look at. But if you are seeing these things, that is usually going to point to a visibility structure. We're not so much worried about what content, because you've already got that. And that's why inside my intensive, this is where we look at the SEO, the positioning, all of those traffic pathways, and not just, you need to be posting more content. So I really break down and figure out if that is one of your bottlenecks. Okay. The second bottleneck is the trust bottleneck. And this one's a little bit more subtle. It's kind of hard to know this, but this is kind of more or less where like people are listening. They like you. They say your episodes are great, but they're not doing anything. So maybe it's not a traffic issue. People are listening to you. This is probably more of your positioning and the structure itself. It's helpful, but maybe it's not automatically equaling that you are the authority. If your episodes are purely educational, without really any strategic positioning, proving that you're the expert, you are training your listeners to just consume you. They are not trying to decide whether or not you are who they need to work with. If you have a trust building episode or episodes, they are going to show more depth. They are demonstrating these, what I like to call perspective shifts. The pattern recognition. You're changing their beliefs into realizing that they need to be thinking about the way you're thinking. You're addressing objections before they've even spoken them, because you know that they have them. So you're bringing them to their attention, and maybe they don't even think they have that objection, but once you say it, they're like, oh, okay, well, that makes sense. And trust building episodes are framing you as the expert, the strategic guide. You're not just the teacher. I, again, was talking to a client, and we started to realize that maybe her episodes were giving a lot of helpful information, and it was probably allowing the listeners to be able to go do it on their own and not need her or not feel the need to purchase from her. So we restructured her episodes in a way that would allow them to realize, oh, I really need her help. So you need to be thinking about that as far as how you're coming across in your episodes. And that's something I do with clients as well. But I want you to think about these. Here's the symptoms again to see if you have a trust bottleneck. So you are constantly hearing, this is so helpful, but they're not asking you, how do I work with you? If you hear that a lot, that's probably they're not trusting. Maybe that's not that they don't trust you, because they're obviously listening to you. What I mean by this is they don't trust that they need your help. That's more of the way I want to get to this. It's meaning that like your episodes are very informative, but they're not building for them to make that decision to needing to purchase your offer. And that's what we also refine inside of my intensive. I look at your episodes to make sure that your episodes have roles, or like I call them, they have jobs, and they're not just episode topics. So think about that. Okay, the third bottleneck is the conversion bottleneck. And this is where things get expensive, because people are trusting you. They are listening to you. They probably even follow you in other places, but they're not moving down your ecosystem. They don't join your email list. They're not booking calls. They're not inquiring about your offer, and they're not purchasing. This is where semi goes with the trust, because you need that trust for them to want to book, but we also are not giving them those options. And maybe we think we are. Maybe we think, well, I'm putting call to actions in my episodes, but is it at the right time, the right place in your podcast funnel? So that's where I like to say this isn't always like a content issue or what you're talking about issue. It's the pathway, like your listener journey. Are you meeting them where they are? If they just found you this morning and they listened to you, then you giving them that call to action is probably not going to do much. But then in your next episode, and then the ones that follow that, if it pulls them down this little funnel, that's what's going to help you. So some of these things could be that these are very vague call to actions or very passive, like, oh, just come work with, or reach out and I'll help you or something, I can't think of anything off the spot right now, but they're very disconnected. They're not, here's what the episode about, here's what I want them to do. You're pointing in too many different directions. Maybe throughout the episode, you told them to download a freebie, apply to work with you, watch a masterclass, do all of these things at once. And they're like, I don't know what to do, so I'm going to do nothing. Your podcast has to guide them into a defined next step, built with intention. This is a part of the intensive, is the planning session. Every episode has a job. So here's the symptoms of the conversion bottleneck. So you have good engagement, but your leads are low. You can't predict how many leads are going to come through. This is why downloads do not equal revenue. They don't necessarily matter. Yes, we do want more downloads because the more downloads we have, we can see that things are increasing. But just like I said, mine won't show up as a download. So it doesn't fully capture the whole picture. It is a little metric that, yes, we do want to follow and look at, but it is so much deeper than the episode planning. This is an ecosystem design, which is the core of my podcast sales intensive. So now let's look at the workflow bottleneck. Your workflow section, a lot of people stay consistent, but most times what I see happen with a lot, especially previous clients of mine, they start so strong. And then after a while, life gets busy and they realize, ooh, this takes a little bit more time than I thought. Then the podcast gets deprioritized. They no longer think of it as what they need to focus on. They know it. They know it matters, but it just did not integrate into their business the way they thought it would. And they never really found a way for it to work. So I want to make sure that if you want your podcast to work for you, we fix the workflow bottleneck. And you may not even have this bottleneck, but your podcast needs to have a defined system. If you are constantly reinventing your process every single week, you are going to get burned out. If you're recording reactively, meaning, oh my gosh, I have to get an episode out. Let me just think about what I want to talk about, come up with something and let me record. I had many clients that did that. It was like made me nervous, but it burned them out. And those are the clients that no longer podcast right now. If you don't have support editing and you're editing under pressure, or you're just throwing your episode out there because you think it's good, and then you're realizing, oh, that did not sound good, I'm embarrassed, you take it down, all of the things. You're doing things in the moment. You're not thinking ahead. You're promoting everything from scratch. Oh my gosh, no wonder why podcasting seems hard. This is very much a fragile process, and it will collapse under pressure and not grow if you do not have the systems in place. So I want you to think about this as you have to have a workflow system. Now, does it have to be, I follow it to a T? No. And your workflow system will change. It will adapt to what fits you, and it will change within the season you're in. If it's the summer and your kids are home, you're going to have to adapt to that. So I want you to be thinking about how this workflow can fit into you. And if you need help, that's what I do. But here's what I want you to think about as far as like symptoms of it. If you are very disciplined in your business, but you're so unpredictable, that is a system issue. You cannot keep up with that. This is why workflows are designed as one of the pillars inside the intensive, because you have to leverage it to become sustainable. You have to have a workflow that fits you. And once you find one, I've even changed mine up a little bit just since Christmas. So you have to adapt, and you have to also realize that it's not a set in stone thing. But now here's what's very important. For some of you, the bottleneck is very simple. You know it's your episode strategy. You know it's the workflow strategy. You know that you're recording consistently, but the episodes aren't mapped intentionally. That's exactly why I have podcast episode planning sessions in the intensive, because sometimes the constraint is just the clarity. In fact, one of my clients, she's got her systems down. I mean, she's a systems expert, but it was just the clarity of what she needs to talk about. So we mapped out the next 12 strategically positioned episodes for her. So she doesn't have to look at her long list of episodes and think, what am I going to talk about? She already knows, and it's built in a way that works for her. But sometimes it needs to go deeper than that. Sometimes the constraint isn't just the episodes themselves, it's the visibility, the conversion, the workflow, how everything connects together. That's an ecosystem issue that we need to work on. And that is the kind of work that we do inside the podcast sales intensive. We take a step back. First, I help you diagnose the real bottleneck in your business. What is the constraint that's holding you back? Where are the leaks? And from there, we rebuild your system so that you see your performance increasing and you're not having to add more things or even, I mean, honestly, you're not even having more effort. It's probably going to be less effort because now you know what to do. But before you jump into anything and think, I've got this bottleneck, what bottleneck do I have? And you want to identify where your bottleneck actually is so that you are not optimizing everything at once. Remember, if you were ever, I was a teacher, but if you ever in a science class, they always say only change one variable at a time. If you are not an expert to diagnose your own bottleneck, start with one thing and go from there. But you want to optimize the tightest point in the system. What is the one that's going to make the biggest effort? Okay. The next thing I want to talk about is here's what happens when you make these shifts, when you figure out the bottleneck. You're going to go from saying, how do I grow my podcast to where's the bottleneck? What's happening? What's stopping the growth? You're going to pick one, not all of them. Remember, one variable at a time, one constraint, and you're going to optimize it from there. When you relieve the tightest constraint in your system, that's where everything's going to start to compound from there. You're going to start to realize that it was just that one little tweak I needed to make. That's infrastructure thinking. That's looking at everything as a whole. Most people just think I need to grow my downloads. That's what's going to fix everything. No. We're thinking like CEOs. We're thinking like the way the podcast is going to make our business run. That's how your podcast becomes leverage in your business. We don't want it to just be one more thing on your to-do list. So I don't want you to just start doing more before you figure out what's holding you back. I want you to increase the alignment that makes everything work. You're going to measure what's going wrong, and I can do this for you. You refine what's happening, you optimize it, and I can probably guess that your podcast, you don't just need better ideas or more ideas. I think it's safe to assume that it's underperforming in whatever way you think it may be, because one part of your system is tighter than the rest and all of those little leaks are happening. So we need to remove that tension so that everything flows. Think of it like this little stream, but every now and then you've got these rocks and it just hits the rock and it breaks up the stream and it's not flowing consistently. We want to remove that. Many people have system constraints. It's not just the episodes, it's the whole system together. And when you see how that full funnel fits together, the traffic, the trust, the conversion, the workflow, all of that stuff, it becomes so obvious where your performance is getting basically like squeezed out, where it's happening. Next week, we're going to go into why your podcast probably feels so busy and not profitable. We go a little bit more in depth on that. So come back next week. Until next time, keep creating episodes that move your listener one step closer to becoming your client, and I will see you next week.